So welcome to our last keynote for this conference, and it's my pleasure to introduce one of our cousins from over the ditch, Superintendent Bruce Bird. Superintendent Bird is a senior New Zealand police officer with over 36 years of experience. He's worked in a number of policing roles within the New Zealand Police Force and has had command experience both at district and area level, based mainly in South Auckland. In his current position of National Manager of Prevention, Superintendent Bird heads up the National Prevention Centre, which develops evidence-based strategies to be implemented at various levels within police. The role also involves building working partnerships with other government agencies and non-government organisations, which I think we all agree is a really important function. The National Prevention Centre focuses on the areas of family violence, victims of crime, alcohol, youth, community policing, schools, deployment and tasking and coordination of policing activities. Over the past 4 years, Superintendent Bird has been involved in the development and implementation of a new police operating model which integrates prevention into the traditional police models of response and investigation. This process necessitated the development of the Prevention First National Operating Strategy. This new strategy is based on the principle that prevention is better than cure. Again, I think it's pretty much a darn good principle, and has seen a major change in how New Zealand police officers think and deliver service for the public. In 2008, Superintendent Bird was awarded a Queen's Service Medal for services to New Zealand Police, and today he's going to be talking us through the Prevention First model. Please welcome Superintendent Bird.
Thanks for that, Adam. E aka nui, e aka rahi, koutou e hui, tahi nei, tēnā koutou katoa, translated to those both near and from afar who have gathered here today. Greetings to you all from New Zealand. Today I'm going to talk about a story, the story of the New Zealand Police since 2008. It's a story of change. It's a story of courage. It's a story of leadership that has taken us into a place where we can now enable our staff, our communities, to work towards a common goal of keeping our communities safe. We start with a very basic premise. The basic mission of police is to prevent crime, not repress it. So we start our story in 2008 when the current Commissioner, Mike Bush, was my district commander in counties Manukau, which is actually South Auckland for anybody who wants to put it into place, and he had a vision. And the vision was that to continue doing the same old would get the same results. Something needed to change in the way that we actually policed. And we'll talk about some of those challenges that happened. The Commissioner was the architect, and I was the builder, I suppose, could be one way of putting it. And we worked together, and we'll work through how we actually managed to pull this through this presentation. But what I will say, we shifted policing in New Zealand from a reactive-based, task-orientated force to one that became proactive. Started using problem-solving methodologies. And why did we do that? Well, we were buggered that the criminal environment was going to dictate terms to us. Who influences crime? Not the criminals. So we needed to start doing what Karen talked about yesterday, being a whole heap smarter. The prevention approach is not new. What we did was to see that it became complementary to the other functions that we do in police. We still respond to 111 calls for service. We still investigate. We still arrest people. So just make sure you're clear that we have not thrown everything out in the bathwater, because we have pulled the things that make police police to stay there, and those things around teamwork are still very, very strong in our culture. The police model we designed situated itself very, very well within the government policy to give communities more legitimacy, and we've heard lots of sessions on that as we've gone through. So just a little bit about how we operate in New Zealand. We've got 12 police districts, 8,907 sworn police officers, and around about 3,000 what we call police employees, non-sworn staff. It is supported from a service centre group at Police National Headquarters, which is based in Wellington. The 8907 is fixed in stone by the government. Won't go up and it won't go down. So that's just a little bit about that. Oh, just one other thing too. I'll just make some apologies right now. During the presentation, I'll probably use some really technical agricultural language, so I do apologise for anyone that's reasonably sensitive, but just roll with the punches. Karen set the tone yesterday, so I think that's fine. What was it that we were being challenged to change? Prevention is actually reasonably pragmatic. We heard from Nick Tilley this morning. It's actually pretty simple. It resonates with staff and it's pretty easy to do, but it also sits with the Pelian principles around policing, and that police should be judged on the absence of crime, and we are part of the community. Now, you can't get away from the fact that we had a financial collapse, and in the 10 years to 2008, there had been a 79% increase in spending in the criminal justice system. Reactive policing is expensive. We had the government championing better public services, and just to give a little bit about that, the government set out 10 key result areas, and they purposely designed it to force government agencies to work together and leverage off resources. As Bill English, our Deputy Prime Minister, said, someone needed to take some leadership to force government agencies to work together. There was a reliance on the criminal justice sector as being the only option that was available in terms of deterrence. This led to a disproportionate focus on reactive policing. Response. Response means you're defending, not attacking. And you get into a mindset that when you see, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, a performance management framework that focuses on, did you reduce burglary? Did you reduce car theft? It focuses your mindset on something a little bit different to what you actually want to achieve, and that will soon come out. We were actually challenged by our own staff. We spent a lot of time talking to our staff who told us we are sick and tired of going to that place time and time and time again. Why can't somebody sort it out? And the final driver, the communities wanted to be involved in their own destiny. They wanted to have a say. And one of the lessons that we learnt when we rolled out the neighbourhood policing teams, and some people have alluded to it, what we think are priorities and what they think are priorities are actually two totally different things. But who are our customers? So we did a lot of work in terms of questioning the traditional policing model as it evolved. And it was one that was based on tasks. It was based on response. It was based on investigation. To respond to the criminal environment, you need to be flexible, adaptable, light on your feet, but it also means you have to empower your staff to make decisions. And that is really, really difficult in a hierarchical system. So instead of viewing as a task, we started to view them as a series of interrelated problems. If there's a pattern, then it's predictable. If it's predictable, it's preventable. But you have to shift your thinking. We were really taken by some work in the literature because we went through and had a look there. George Bailey wrote a book in 1994 in which he basically stated that police were a fraud because they did not prevent crime. Ross Hommel from Griffith was a little bit more circumspect and asked the question, can police prevent crime? When I first read those books, it rankled. Of course we do. But when you went back and started to think about what they were saying, it started to challenge our thinking. And throughout the process, we started to look at numerous bits of literature to discern a number of principles that would drive our police model. And we started to pull them together from that literature. So we picked up some stuff around problem solving, we picked up some stuff around intelligence-informed policing, evidence-based policing, and we started to integrate this into a model. But what we didn't do was just rely on police only. We went out and talked to the business sector. We talked to a lot of people to get different perspectives. And it was really interesting when you get some people there that come in and look at an organisation over the top, what might happen. And we would have done about 7 or 8 masterclasses where we had a lot of the top business brains in the country there challenging us. We shifted and opened ourselves up to a whole heap of feedback. And it's until you do that that you will actually make some progress. Now, I've said something about the criminal justice system. Deterrence theory relies on an effective criminal justice system. And I'm indebted to a good friend of mine, Spencer Cheney, for producing this. I think it's out of the UK. Now, I'm not going to comment on the criminal justice system there, but you can read through there and make your own conclusions. Because I know one thing, talking to offenders in New Zealand, They have judged the effectiveness of the criminal justice system so well that they know they've got a reasonable chance of escaping detection. And somebody told me the clearance rate for burglary in Victoria was 15 or so %, which means that 85% of it doesn't happen. So, the New Zealand police model, it is an economic type model. Reduce demand, increase productivity, efficiency, effectiveness, etc. The prevention first strategy situates itself in the reducing demand part. We also rolled out 32 neighbourhood policing teams in locations in New Zealand that were very, very difficult. Increasing productivity was not about working harder. It was about us trying to figure out ways that we could keep our staff on the street longer. These things here, there's 12,000 of these things in the New Zealand Police. And most of our staff can do all their work off one of these. We were told it cannot be done. We do have a fully mobile police force. If I wanted to go and do some checks on Kevin, I can sit here and go on this and do those checks. Very shortly, we will do all our reporting on one of these. We introduced other measures around file briefing centres, investigation support units, crime reduction, crime reporting lines, etc., etc. And there was a whole heap of benefits that came out of that in terms of time that we need to account for back to government. So you can start to see there's a real business sense in here. We shifted victims to the centre of our business. Not offenders, but victims. There is an absolute strength in terms of continuous improvement, and the continuous improvement is driven from the front line. They tell us what it is that they need to do the job. And then we start designing it. It comes back to a theory that 80% of frontline staff know the good ideas and bosses only know about 20%. Nick talked about it this morning, what happens when people get into higher positions, what starts to happen. But what we did was we shifted the performance management framework from a focus on outcomes to the things that we needed to look at that we wanted to do really, really well. And we linked it to problems. So I'm now a district commander in the Waikato, and we have a number of problems, and we measure that. And we do that for a pretty simple reason. If we do those things really, really well, the outcome measures will take care of themselves. My experience over 37 years, if you focus on the outcome measures, your responses will be pretty narrow. So, this is how simple it gets. This is what the framework we anchor prevention first off. The letters in bold make up 16 letters, and it fundamentally drives the way that we police. Set, enable, expect. So, the executive set the operating strategy. They enable the districts by providing resources. So that's the what that is now set. The how is now over to the districts. Through the leadership framework, we enable our staff to seek out innovative approaches to prevent crime. Contrast that to the traditional model where you shall, you shall, you shall, you shall. But there's an expectation that you've got to make sure that that community feels safe and are safe. That is non-negotiable. This very simple framework sets up the accountability framework, as you can see. We do not hold a district commander accountable. We hold the district leadership team accountable. When I was asked to design the model, Mike Bush's mandate to me was, you know every single way to slip out of accountability. I want this nailed, closed up. I was not popular with a lot of district commanders because all the excuses were now removed. They went. And we just did it off this framework. We set the whole New Zealand Police leadership framework up off these. You will hear our executive talking about set, enable, expect. So some of those expectations were there would be a 4% shift into prevention-focused activities. We got the maths severely wrong here, and it ended up being about 10 or 11%. There was to be a 13% reduction in crime. And that was passed with relative ease in the first couple of years. And then there was to be a 19% reduction in a number of cases referred to the justice sector pipeline. What that in essence meant was that instead of putting everybody before the court, there would be an alternative actions type program where they went and did something else. And there was a reason for that. We were sick and tired of our staff sitting in court for low-level offending and having up to 30-odd officers sitting there day after day. So now we'll start moving into the pillars. Deploying to beat demand, understanding and responding to the drivers of crime and fostering a change in mindset that puts prevention and the needs of victims at the front end. So deploying to beat demand was asked to preemptively deploy our resources to prevent the escalation of demand in real time. Sounds really, really quite good there, and it is really difficult to do because you're balancing off those calls for services against some things that are happening in real time. It's tricky. Attending a priority one call for service is the absolute priority for the New Zealand Police. We will always do that. But we wanted to get in and doing something. This is our short-term intervention, using police resources which will ultimately be unsustainable. Because you've only got one option then, is you want more. And it was supported by a structured and disciplined framework that looks like that. Sitting at the centre is the tasking and coordination process, which is fed by a whole heap of critical command information. A centralised workforce management system works beside it, and we move into a real-time intelligence process through this model. and the operational delivery part of it is controlled by what we call a district command centre. It is not our communications centre that deploys resources to 111 calls for service. It controls every part of the business other than that. So when it starts to see things in real time, and we see things in absolute real time, we start making a whole heap of deployment decisions there and then 24/7. It does not wait for the commander to come in at 8 o'clock in the morning. It waits for no one. It has the full mandate of the district commanders to make deployment decisions there and then. It changes the way you do business, because it is actually the single point of truth in a police district. It holds all of the knowledge. But it challenges a few things as well. The next part was around understanding and responding to the drivers of crime, and this is our long-term sustainable approach. So the priorities that we settled on were organised crime and drugs, alcohol, youth, families. And also, because 23% of our business is around road policing, we included that. Now, families is not just family violence. Crime families play into here big time. Mental health comes into here. You could actually boil a lot more down here and actually say, well, money is actually the driver of crime. But that's actually pretty restrictive. So what has this actually meant for us? Using the methodologies that Nick Tilley used today, we look to understand our problems in terms of these drivers. I have seen a lot of police forces in the world try to step into parts of the business that belong to other agencies. You've got to stop and think, what is it that police do? It's to increase risk, make it harder for offenders to commit offences. It's about using your brains and thinking. So we shape up these here and go from there. Now, I said the New Zealand Police have not had an increase in budget for 5 years. And we've just recently released our budget, and the Deputy Prime Minister was cross-examined by the opposition on this. And this is what he had to actually say. Police are now showing they fully understand the drivers of crime and how to work with others. By focusing on the drivers of crime and not crime itself, you create new opportunities which brings new perspectives. Police are showing how you work in a problem-solving methodology with other partners. Double-sided sword, I think, because we get no extra resource for the good work that we've actually been done. But we've eliminated the argument that you need more resource. You don't need more resource, you just need to think a lot smarter. So we have now seen some stunning new partnerships take off, and they are stunning. We had a problem in Auckland with number plates being stolen. Countdown said, we'll help you out there. And they set up in their car parks a place there where you could go in and they'd put these new screws in so you could not remove number plates. Countdown did it. Not us. They just said, no, we can do something about that. We've got a service station group over there called Z. It used to be Shell. They stepped in and started doing a whole lot of stuff around driving an ANPR system that sits solely in the private sector. And they've got organisations connecting up to it, and they just enter the registration number in. And if they rock up at some other retailer, they can either turn off the pumps, or if they go into a supermarket, they might have someone who meets the person there and provides some outstanding customer service by escorting those people around the shop. We've also driven our own POP awards, and I was really interested to hear that around what was happening in Durham in particular. And to make sure that we continue to lift the standard there, we get some world-renowned experts coming in, and this year we had Professor Gloria Laycock and Spencer Cheney come through to do the judging. We are starting to really move into that space now and pull out a whole heap of good thinking, so much so that last year's winner, who represented us in the States, would not have made the finals this year. And Gloria was telling us that things are actually starting to look pretty good. But when you're designing these solutions, you've got to work with the community because they all have a different perspective. In 2008, I was the area commander in South Auckland when we had some unprecedented youth violence. Over a 9-month period, 11 people died. And some of the deaths were truly barbaric, such as tying up a 14-year-old youth behind his hands and dragging him in a car for a kilometre. And it was really interesting. There was 2 communities that were separated by probably about 1.5 k's, and this is burned into my memory. And the people from Mangere stood up. This is what we want to do. This is how we're going to approach it. And that sounded pretty good to me. The people from Otara stood up. With all due respect to our colleagues from Mangere, this is how we want to do it. And there's a point in here, because if we weren't careful, our arrogance would actually say, no, you'll actually do it like this, in which case you get no community legitimacy. Now, what was really interesting in that case, the community did not like what was happening to their youth. And they told us lots and lots of stuff about it. We got intelligence that you wouldn't believe about. But they wouldn't tell us about drug dealing. So when you're thinking about the community, the power sits all there. Okay, we've got a big focus on victims as we start because it sits at the heart of trust and confidence. We have developed a graduated response model, I would say, that sort of indicates who the high risk victims are, and it is actually something that will move to a fully aligned one-stop shop with the things. And one thing we've actually found is that we're actually not very good with victims. We don't have those softer skills or the patience to sit there and get to really understand why that person is actually a victim. So we've given it a go by using police staff, and quite frankly, we stuffed it up. But we will go and use people that are absolutely subject matter experts that can actually drill down and get to the heart of why a person is actually a victim, because it takes time. Having said that, there are some really good stories. The sole charge constable in the South Island was asked to go and see a victim of family violence. His initial reaction was, no, I'm not. I don't need to. I know that person in the community. Everything's okay. But he said, I'll go down and sit down. We ended up charging her husband with rape, abduction, serious assaults. He's now doing 14 years because we assumed we knew. And we didn't. How to change the mindset of your staff. Police forces around the world have a traditional approach. It's hierarchical, it's risk adverse, it has centralised decision making, it's offender-centric, and it's based on management. Now I'll deal with a couple of these. Centralised decision making. I arrive in the Waikato, and there's this nice 3-page report prepared by someone from the Armed Defenders Squad wanting $50 worth of kit. Why has this come to me? Because the district commander makes all the decisions around spending. Really? I was more worried about how what was that too? I was going to spend $200,000 because the district had been really financially prudent, and the commissioner had said, you better spend it or you'll lose it. I had 3 weeks to spend $200K. Now, I didn't do really very well at accounting or maths, but the final bill came in at around about $400,000, and he was not well amused, believe me. But management is easy. It is merely the application of some standard operating procedures and policies. And if you think about the leadership meetings that you have, you will be talking about things like budget, district orders, admin stuff. And I don't give a shit. I absolutely don't. Because why? Because I've got a whole heap of technical people who know that stuff. And they can do it. Because what I do give a shit about is reducing crime and making communities safe. Absolutely is my focus. Others can do the technical business, the management. Got no problems with that. Get in and do it, but I want to have conversations. So when I get to the Waikato and I have a look at their tactical plan, and they've identified their problems, well, why aren't we talking about these things? There's a good reason for it. Management is comfortable. Leadership is really uncomfortable because you work in an ambiguous world. When we started designing the prevention first strategy and the police model, we were far from risk adverse. We sat there and defined 6 principles. That was it. That's the game plan. These are the rules of the game. And we grew it organically. Guess what? We knew up there sort of what it wanted to look like. We just let our operational staff go. And we got stunning results. We got innovation and continuous improvement like you wouldn't believe. And everyone in government departments told us we were nuts. But there was a guy who just went up from New Zealand that we spoke to, Entrepreneur of the Year Award. And he had one simple philosophy: give it a friggin' go. If anybody's bought shares in Xero, and if you bought them really in the early stages when they cost about $2 a share and they're now about $40 a share, you would have done really, really well. So what did we want to move to? We did want leadership. And we've certainly devolved decision-making in that. But I'm just going to tell you a little story. And this happened last Saturday night, and it will exemplify exactly what it is we're talking about. The All Blacks were playing England. England is the one country we always want to beat at rugby, no matter what. At the 76th minute of a game, and they go for 80 minutes, the All Blacks are awarded a penalty. 35 metres straight out in front of the post. The All Black goal kicker had already kicked 5 out of 5 penalties. So it was a pretty safe bet that he'd probably kick this one. The All Black captain hands the ball to the All Black goal kicker, who walks up to the mark and he's standing there with the ball. The English rugby team expected that he was going to have a shot at goal, and they started moving back, ready for that. He tapped the ball, and he's gone 2 steps. I'm sitting in a place in Hamilton with 50 other people. What did you think the reaction was? There were some really technical agricultural terms explained. Now we'll speed up 2 hours. And they're talking to the main parties that are involved there. So they asked the English coach, what did you think of that tap? Really, really bold. They spoke to the All Black coach. What did you think about the tap? Well, somebody needed to do something bloody well different to change up the game. They then spoke to the All Black captain. We encourage our players to make decisions, and he went for it. Now let's talk about the player who took the tap penalty. My job as the playmaker in the team is to see opportunities to score tries. All of those stories there just encapsulate everything that we actually want in leadership. People to take risks and give something a go. People to be empowered to make some decisions. One thing I've learnt out of 37 years of policing is this. I've made some monumental stuff-ups. Last night, talking with Karen, we tried to see who was actually the best. She won hands down. But if you don't try something, you never learn. And a risk-adverse organisation does not encourage you to try something different so you get the same old, same old. Coincidentally, the All Blacks did score. It was a bit heartbreaking for a couple of seconds, but they did actually get there. So we focused in very much on a leadership framework, and this is something that we look to do around how we brought all this together. Phase 1 was about alignment, and it wasn't alignment with the prevention-based staff, it was an organisational-wide alignment. Every single work group had to understand what their purpose was and how they contributed to the overall game. And if they didn't, we weren't worried. We needed to change it. What that process actually outlined to us was where we were short in capability. And what we did there was we quickly identified where we were short in skills. And we went out and bought it. We didn't hang on to the old stuff. Through the process, I got told time and time again, when I asked, why did we do that? Because we've always done it that way. Guess what? Didn't give a shit. Here's your rules. What can you now design? What do you think happened when we gave it to the staff to design their own workforce? We got buy-in and engagement. Absolutely. It wasn't dictated from the top, it was built from the bottom, and that is a key point. If you are trying to run a transformational change program within your organisation, do it from the operational side. Sorry for all those people who work in policy, strategy and all of that. But most staff don't actually think you understand policing. And if you can relate to the front line, you can start to drive a whole heap of change. 5 minutes. Better get a move on then. I'll finish out basically here. The implementation was overseen by the Deputy Commissioner of Operations, who's now the Commissioner of Police, who put his hands right in deep down into the org. He just didn't say, go off and do that. He was out and about talking to the front line all of the time. So was I. 5:30 most nights we would get together and meet and start discussing what it was that we were seeing and what was changing. Performance indicators, not the outcome measures, were strongly monitored. Benefit realisation was strongly monitored. We undertook district command assessments. Each district had a change implementation team, and that looks all really good and funky and technical. Now I'll tell you, there's a lot of B's in this. It's bloody well brutal. You will be bloodied. You will be bruised. But if you have absolute self-belief, you'll never be broken. We got run out of towns. We were told by old school inspectors, see the door? Go. It is not easy to drive a process like this, and you have to demonstrate high levels of resilience. And what drives you? The communities liked what we were doing. They kept on telling us, this is fantastic. This is what we want to do. It drives you. So don't go into this half-hearted. You will be exposed. Get rid of the moments of shit. Moments of shit go like this. Boss, I've been thinking about an idea. No, you can't do it. We see that in policing in New Zealand all the time. What we're now looking for is moments of perfection. Give it a go and come back and tell me what you found. By the way, though, I've done a bit of study here, and there's a couple of things that you might just want to consider that helps you, because we've done a lot of work looking at literature and things like that, and we're getting better at that evidence-based approach. For the future, we've now laid the platform. Policing Excellence, the future, will now begin in earnest. It's been led by Mark Evans. I've managed to escape, thank God, and move on. But this mobility will be a cornerstone of the new way that we will do some policing. But don't ever get me wrong. Whilst technology is one of the greatest enablers that we've got, and we get literally dozens of IT companies who come to New Zealand and say, have I got a deal for you? Policing is all about people. And that is absolutely at the cornerstone of this there. I'll just jump into some lessons learned, because some people wanted to talk about that. Always test your assumptions. Some of the assumptions that we had around policing were: enforcement drives sustainability. I'll just get a quick show of hands. Can we actually assume that nobody here wants to be a victim of crime? Anybody does? And get an outstanding police service? 2 people so far have stuck their hands up to say they'd rather be a victim to have that really good police interaction, which I found quite strange. You've got to really stretch those assumptions out, and don't ever lie or mislead your front line. It needs a whole of organisation approach, and I've talked about how we grew that organically. Engage face to face. Our Commissioner is the best at it. He fronts and sits down and talks to staff. So if he was at this table here, he'd just sit down, put down a pack of biscuits and say, tell me about policing. And the good thing about a lot of police staff is they're refreshingly honest. Sweat the cents and the dollars will look after themselves. Deal with the minor issues before it becomes a major. Always be fair, consistent, and never create a precedent. Stick to your principles. And we had some clear principles that we always stuck to, which was the game plan that we actually had. Finally, have some fun. Get out and actually enjoy it. It is difficult, not impossible, but if you don't have any fun, you'll soon be admitting yourself into a mental institution really, really fast. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.